Hey there. I'm really glad you're here in the Sink and Swim podcast. Before we get into today's episode, a little housekeeping. I want to help you get oriented just so you know where you are, how the space works, and how to take care of yourself while you're listening. So first, a gentle invitation. As you listen or watch, see if you can listen not only with your ears or watch with your eyes, but also by noticing what's going on inside your body. And that may change throughout the whole episode. And as you notice, permission to know you don't need to fix anything, you don't need to analyze it, but just notice it. Some parts of you might feel seen. Some might feel exposed. Some parts might feel resistance or concern about what we're saying. Other parts might feel relief, encouragement, or they might want to reach through and help us or hug me if it's just me talking. So notice how you feel as you settle in, whether you're listening in a quiet place or out on a walk or driving or in the middle of something, and also how you feel when you're done. That noticing is really sacred work. And after you listen to the episode and notice, if you find yourself feeling the tug to stay connected to me or to the podcast or to any of my guests, please make sure to check the show notes and also make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening right now. Now is a great time to go hit that subscribe button. And I'm not asking that for numbers, but because it lets the episodes find you without you having to remember or keep track. And if you like having something you can read or revisit or sit with more slowly, you can also subscribe to my newsletter, and that's in the show notes as well. You can also find clips and highlights on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Substack, and Facebook. All different platforms, different doorways to the same house. So choose whatever feels easiest for you. At any point today, later, or months from now, if something in you starts whispering, I feel this nudge inside. My life or my work looks really good on paper. Everything I've built should feel good, but that's not how I feel. And sometimes that can be a sign that it's time for deeper support and reorientation. And that's where working with me in a soul story mapping session comes in. It's a private one-on-one session, not a discovery call, not a sales conversation. It's an actual coaching space to map what's true for you right now and get clear on what wants to shift. Even if you don't do anything with it, we're just going to map it out. All of the links to all of those things live in the show notes, so you don't have to hold any of this in your head, but I'm saying it now to orient you in case you're listening and something comes up and you want to know where to go next. Okay, let's drop into today's episode now. Hey everyone, welcome back to Sink and Swim. I'm really excited about this episode because I have so many exciting stories to share with you. And I've been hearing from a lot of clients and from a lot of friends and from a lot of colleagues that they are in the midst of some type of career pivot. I don't know if there's something in the water or in the spring air, but it does seem like it's a trend happening in the world right now. Maybe it's the year of the fire horse and we're all moving somewhere. Anyway, I'll be sharing stories about healthcare providers, clinicians, people in the health and wellness world who have made pivots into some type of different career path. And when I share these stories, these are examples of clients I have worked with in this realm who I have coached through the pivot, who I have walked alongside time and time again as they have pivoted into something and then later out of something that I once guided them into. It is such an honor to guide people to dream and move across certain thresholds and also really tune into themselves, to their bodies, and get really clear on what actually feels right to them, especially in a world where we're taught what our careers are supposed to look like. There's lots of check boxes. There's lots of common paths that people take. Not that any of them are wrong, but we would call those maybe the road more traveled. And it's such a brave thing for anyone in any industry to say, you know what, this commonly tread path is not my path. Even though it's common and it's what's accepted as normal, it's not normal for me. And it takes so much courage and self-awareness and bravery to face all of the dissonance that comes up inside of you when you see yourself for the first time no longer belonging on a certain path. That can be so hard because you may have developed friendships, colleagues, a reputation, habits. I mean, you might have built a whole life around a certain well-worn career path. And sometimes that's the problem, right? You realize you get into a certain path and your whole life now revolves around it. You've built your life around it. And then you realize, oh, shoot, this isn't it anymore. And there's this reckoning and grieving, but also relief that can come with that. And I think that's just quite common in the healthcare industry. Me being my background a physical therapist, but I work with people from all realms of health and wellness. It not only is a career, but it has become a lifestyle and an identity. It has become your primary friend group. It is so much a part of who you are. And part of that can be, as I said, part of the problem. You've built your whole life and identity around it. And so deconstructing that can feel very, very hefty. And then part of it is this is what got you into that. This is what your soul invited you to do. And you may have outgrown the container you're in, but the underlying deeper, 5 layers deeper story of why your whole life and identity got wrapped into this comes from a really good place. It comes from this very purposeful, soul-driven thing. And that's what I help people sink into and uncover, because it's not that you made a wrong decision, and that's part of the reckoning process. There can be some forgiveness, self-compassion that needs to come when you realize, ooh, I'm in something that's not right for me. And like, you can lose trust with yourself because it can be really easy to go, well, wait, how did I ever agree to this in the first place? How did I get myself into this? Was I not connected with myself? And what I want to offer is, yes, you were connected with yourself and it was right for you at the time to move into this container, whatever it is, and you outgrew it. Maybe it was like a holding cell. It wasn't your permanent home. And the reckoning that can come with that, where you thought you were going to be here forever, where you thought this was sort of your life's work and your life's path, that can be incredibly jarring. But I just want to offer that on the other side, it can be incredibly freeing to see that this was just a stepping stone. It was right for you. And sinking into those deeper layers of really listening to yourself and what's right for you can reveal something that you never imagined would be your next stepping stone on your path. And what's so interesting is clients work with me once and then they outgrow whatever container they stepped into, and then they work with me again. And we work on the deconstructing and the moving out of, but also the dreaming and the moving towards. And it's such an honor to help people with that. And so I am here to share stories today because, the title of this episode is the healthcare career pivots you don't see on LinkedIn. And you might see people making announcements on LinkedIn or Facebook, or, just they might send you a message or an email and tell you about what they're doing, or it might show up in their Christmas card letter or whatever. But what you don't see, the developmental process that goes behind the actual pivot, and is what defines the pivot. We think the pivot is moving from point A to point B. All right, I was a PT in a hospital, and then I got a job at a telehealth company so I could work from home. But no one talks about everything that happened in the middle of that process. They just talk about point A, here's where I was, point B, here's where I am now. And there's these announcements. I'm so excited to announce that I've received a promotion, blah, 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 blah. You hear about this and you see people in the comments just praising them, and it's so exciting and this is great. But you don't hear about the people who questioned them, or the people who challenged them, or the conversations with their spouse where they were reckoning with what it would mean to take a pay cut or to have to start buying your own healthcare benefits. You don't hear about the identity shift that comes with changing roles or jobs or responsibilities or complete entire professional industries. And that's the work I help people through. And I think that it's extremely underrated to have someone guiding you through that process. It can feel incredibly isolating, and you can be filled with doubt and almost force yourself into a pivot where you take on a new job and then you realize 3 to 6 months in, wow, this wasn't right for me. And so slowing down and actually going through what I see as a pretty standard developmental sequence in people. I've done this for 10 years. I've kind of started to observe and see that there's really 4 stages people move through in the career pivot. You hear about stage 0, which is where they once were. That's point A. And you hear about stage 4, which is where they are now. But you don't hear about stages 1, 2, and 3. And those are just incredibly rich stages for learning about yourself. And you can't skip them. Some people try and skip them, and that's where they just rush from one thing to the next. And then later they regret making a decision they made, or they just repeat the same patterns over and over again, moving from job to job or business to business or thing to thing, and, get to a certain point where they're like, why does this keep happening to me no matter where I am? And when we don't slow down in those 3 stages and really reckon with who we are and what we're meant to do and why, and who we're meant to be surrounded by, and how we show up in our, not just our work relationships, but also our life relationships, and how those connections shape how we show up in our work and how our work shapes how we show up in our relationships, it's really easy to end up on sort of a constant merry-go-round of career changes. But I say that, and some people's design and wiring and personality is to be one of constant reinvention, sort of like a butterfly, sort of like just, you outgrow things, you pour your whole heart into them and you outgrow them. And so that's the thing I also love to help people discover is maybe you're actually not meant to be in any one place for your whole life, which is a departure from what our culture and our society teaches you that you need to do, to always stay on the well-worn path, to pick one and stick with it for your life, because that's what commitment means. But I would argue that commitment means actually staying committed to yourself, staying committed to what feels right in the moment, committing to the bit when you actually choose a path and choose a job or add something to your business or open a business or shut down a business or whatever, commit to it. And then pour your whole heart into it, and then you might outgrow it. And that's actually normal. We are evolving beings. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. I'm not the same person I was 20 minutes ago, And when we don't allow ourselves to evolve, we miss out on the richness of life. We are avoiding sometimes facing some of those hard feelings and decisions that come with stepping outside of the well-worn path. And so that might feel temporarily good, but we're also, when we avoid the icky, sticky emotions and experiences, we also avoid the joy, the richness, the aliveness. I work with people on not just their work, but also the rest of them, and making sure that they are the version of themselves they want to be in all spaces of their life. So I just really, really commend you if you're listening and you're in some part of the journey. Maybe you're arriving after a big pivot. Maybe you are contemplating one. And I want to encourage you that if you are contemplating, or you're in the middle of it, or you're maybe closing out a cycle of pivoting, that this takes a lot of courage and a lot of wherewithal to break from that well-worn path. So good for you. So the first thing I actually want to highlight are the phases of the journey that you might find yourself in when it comes to career pivots. And there's different reasons that you move from phase to phase. But they're not necessarily linear, although they do kind of work that way, but you can't really skip the developmental process of each phase. It's just, it doesn't happen. Sometimes you move faster through one or the other compared to yourself or compared to other people. Sometimes the experiences of one phase hit you differently than someone else, or you don't even realize you're there. And so when you know what phase you're in, it also helps you map what needs to happen next. Just develop a sense of orientation, because this process of pivoting from one job to the next, or even one life situation to the next, can feel so disorienting for all the reasons I already named, because your identity might be wrapped up in it, your lifestyle, your habits, your relationships, everything. So when we start to challenge or change those parts of ourselves, which are so deeply rooted in your body and your nervous system, your system's going to kick in. And the most common things people feel are confused, lost, lacking direction, unclear, anxious, doubtful, also excited, dreamy, desiring. Maybe there's like a different desire every day, a different idea every day. So those kinds of things can feel so disorienting, because your body is trying to recalibrate and land in a place that feels like it's you. And that can be really, really hard when you're a multidimensional being and you have lots of different parts of you that have various interests and desires and needs and wants and sensitivities. And you also have lots of people in your life who rely on you. So it can just be a very disorienting process. So knowing where you are along the journey can bring a sense of validation, like, oh, okay, this is why this feels like it's taking so long, or this is why I feel this way, or this is actually completely normal for me to be experiencing. And when we can normalize things, it can turn down the volume of how loud your system might react to certain things, how challenging it can feel to show up in public spaces where people are asking the $1,000,000 question that we all hate, which is, so what do you do? And you just like freak out because you don't quite know how to answer that. And it can also help you figure out, okay, what are the next things I actually need to do systematically so that I move through this process in a way that's actually sustainable for me, so that I don't rush through it just to feel like I have something secure and stable, but then really regret it later. And so that I know and put my head on my pillow at the end of the day and know, okay, I'm moving at the pace I need to move. I'm taken care of. I'm resourced. I'm safe. And it's okay that I'm in the messy middle here. And I don't need to necessarily say yes to this job offer simply to have a job. Maybe, maybe not. We'll talk about that. But anyway, so I'll share with you the stages, and then I'll share with you lots of stories of clients who have walked through this, and particularly share what it looks like to actually go through the journey and what it feels like. I also want to share the stories because a lot of times when we dream and desire and we're trying to figure out what's next, we get kind of stuck. What can happen is you're so clear on what you don't want anymore because that's your current situation. It's right in front of you. There's things you're clear that don't feel good. There's things that you're like, oh, no, that's not for me anymore. Those people aren't for me. You might be setting boundaries. You're sort of like, ugh, I need to get out of this, even if you're still in it. But it can be very difficult to dream and desire, especially if there's any amount of stress going on in that current version of your life. We're not actually wired to dream and desire and think of the future and visualize what could feel amazing if our bodies are constantly trying to manage a situation that feels really stressful. That's extremely neuroprotective of ourselves. And so sometimes we need to like come in contact with other things, like other people's stories, not that those need to become your stories, not that you need to be a carbon copy of them, to even be able to start to access what is possible and get ideas going. That's what I find for a lot of people that I work with. They come to me and they're like, well, I know it's not this anymore, but I don't know what's next. Exactly. They have sort of a vague idea. They've had some maybe like little dreams and desires that feel too out of reach or impractical, which sometimes are exactly what they need to be doing. But dreaming and desiring can be very, very difficult when you're still in a situation. Okay, so let's walk through the stages. Stage 0 is, I don't even have a name for it. We're just going to call it stage 0. We're just going to call it the status quo. This is where you're in a current work and life situation. Things are hunky-dory. You have no dreams or aspirations of changing anything. This is what I call swimming. This is everything's going swimmingly. You're happy, no dreams of changing. Maybe one day you'll retire, right? Or maybe one day you'll pivot into something else, but you aren't necessarily looking to change or do anything right now. Everything's working for you. Love this. This is actually quite common and it's a good place to be. And I actually say this one mirrors stage 4, but at some point, something's going to happen when you're in stage 0 that might shift you into stage 1. And that could be any number of things. It could be that you move to another city. It could be that there is a death of a family member. It could be that you have a health challenge and you just start looking at how managing your own body is challenging in your current work situation. It could be that a global pandemic comes in and you're forced to work from home and you start to question all kinds of things. So things that move you from stage 0 to stage 1 are often things that you didn't choose, or maybe you did. Maybe you went on a huge vacation and you became a different person when you were there and you just were exposed to things that you wouldn't have ever been exposed to in your current status quo life. So that often kicks you into stage 1, which brings us to stage 1. Stage 1 is the scouting stage, where something has gotten your attention in your job, outside of your job, in your health, in your family, in your body, in your relationships. Something is happening that is having you start to feel things and question. It could be a little flicker of a question. It could be loud. And you're just starting to scout out, first of all, what it even means. I think of this also like similar to when you're falling in love with someone. And it's that first moment where you have that realization where you're like, oh, I like them. It could be not just a romantic relationship. It could be a friend where you're like, I feel something. So you've gone from nothing with that person to you're feeling something. And for most people, whether they realize it or not, the experience you have in the scouting stage is somatic. It's in your body. And a lot of times there aren't necessarily stories that are going on that are explaining what you're feeling, but our brains are wired for story and they're going to try and explain it. And a lot of times what you'll do naturally in this scouting stage is, oh, I must be stressed. And so you'll try and regulate your nervous system. You'll try and do all kinds of things to calm down these signals, these nudges, these tugs that are coming from your body related to your work. Now, the scouting stage applies not just related to work, it applies to all things. In fact, all these stages are the developmental stages of change for any human going through any transformation, whether it's work related or life related or personal or relationship. But anyway, scouting is a growing awareness that something is off. Maybe you can put your finger on it. Maybe you can't put your finger on it. Maybe you kind of misdiagnosing it. And so you're just chasing things that feel uncomfortable, inner rumblings, a growing sense of restlessness. And you might just be starting to research how things could be different for you. And in a work context, it could look like starting to set boundaries where you didn't before, starting to turn down opportunities or projects where you previously would have said yes. It might look like taking more vacation than you normally do, especially if you're someone who doesn't normally take or like use up your vacation time. If you're an entrepreneur, it could look like just contemplating adding a team member or firing a team member or adding a new service. There's lots of things that happen in the scouting stage, but what happens here is there's not really a lot of action going on. It's just a lot of thinking and considering. And a lot of times in this stage, you're not even telling people what's going on because you're actually not like sure that the things you're thinking and feeling and experiencing are correct or true. You're questioning them even. You're like, God, I keep thinking maybe this job or this business isn't for me, but I'm not sure that's right. There might be something wrong with me, right? So there's just a lot of scouting and questioning and feeling through and sifting through, and it can be very confusing. And when people come to me in this stage, a lot of times we're just working through all of it, putting it all out on the table and going, all right, what does all this mean? And I think that what can happen, especially if you're an ambitious woman, especially if you tend to always know what to do, you're sort of the diagnose and treat type clinician, you're like looking for a reason, you're looking for a solution, is it you can try and rush yourself along to pick something either to like calm down your restlessness and fix it and treat it, make it a problem and like pathologize yourself and blame yourself. And maybe you just need to work harder or get more motivated. And people can kind of double down, especially if you get that sense that you've built something career-wise and you're starting to question it. People can double down and actually go to an extreme opposite and like sign up for more courses, sign up for certifications, sign up for the business growth mastermind because you're like, all right, I'm questioning this. Maybe I'm just having doubt. Maybe I just need to double down and dedicate myself to it more. So that can also happen. All right. So that is just a gross summary of the scouting stage, stage one. And a lot of people don't come to me in this stage, but it's really cool when you do because it can save you a lot of time, energy, and wasted money, wasted experiences, trying to solve for problems that are not actually the problem. And so we really can identify what the actual problem is, what the actual desire is, and move you along into the seeking stage, which is stage 2. Seeking is where the actual action and problem solving starts to happen. It's where you have a little bit more direction on, okay, here's what actually these rumblings and these inner things are telling me. And here's where I start to figure out what I need to do about it and where I need to go with it. And seeking can look a whole lot like taking steps. It can look like, all right, I know that I do clinical work and I want to move into coaching and I'm going to take a coaching certification. I'm going to start following coaches on Instagram. I'm going to start engaging with that. Maybe you already have a coaching skills. Maybe you're going to start practicing coaching skills with clients and just play with it. Maybe you start telling people out in the real world that you're considering making a pivot. So you're seeking not just like the thing, the container, but there's also a seeking of the feeling of belonging in that new identity, in that new space. And if it's more job related, you might be putting out feelers, you might actually be networking, talking to people in the desired direction you're going. You might be playing with different directions. For clinicians, this can look like actually joining non-clinical Facebook groups, following the sort of non-clinical career people on Instagram, taking courses, all kinds of things can happen here. Maybe you're learning to code because you're thinking and you want to do more like web design stuff. So that all can happen here. The thing about the seeking stage one, is it's more like you're running in place. It's like you're on a treadmill. There is movement happening. Whereas in stage one is a lot of sitting still and contemplating and considering and like doing mental gymnastics. This can be a little bit more action gymnastics. And the problem with that is you can run on a treadmill forever, right? You can do things that feel like you're actually taking action and moving forward here in stage. What are we on? 2? I'm losing track. But when you're seeking, it's possible to seek in place and never actually move forward, because what has to happen to actually move forward is reckon with an identity change, reckon with potential pushback from people who are close to you, which is extremely common. Reckon with actually taking the steps to deconstruct your habits and form new ones. It can look like having to make intimate connections with people who you need in order to support you in your business. It can look like having to make investments. It can look like all kinds of things. And those things can feel vulnerable and incredibly daunting and intimidating. And I see a lot of clinicians who have been in this stage for a very long time, sometimes decades, who are circling the plane, but not landing. And it can look like taking certifications, taking every coaching certification possible. I know I say coaching a lot because that's the transition I've made, but it can look like taking on, maybe the smallest project. Maybe you make a website for this new business that you're creating, but you're not actually fully actively going the extra mile to seek clients. It can look like making an Instagram. It can look like posting all the time, but there's not a real concerted effort to step into stage 3. You're just kind of there, and it can feel really frustrating, and you feel like you're moving, but nothing's happening. So if that's you, that's stage 2, the seeking stage. And it is exactly that. There's this seeking, but there's not necessarily receiving that happens here. So frustrating. A lot of people come to me in this stage, and we work through a lot of really interesting pieces of what actually needs to happen to move them forward into stage 3. And the other thing that I see for people in stage 2 is they want to move into stage 4. I have arrived, I'm finally here, and skip stage 3. And unfortunately, that is just not a thing. And because whether they realize the actual logistical steps to move into stage 3 and then stage 4, their bodies likely sense that it's perhaps the most vulnerable set of steps. And so the bodies put up resistance, your mind will put up resistance, distractions will get thrown at you from the world. Sort of the universe is actually conspiring to protect you. And it can just look like, oh, well, this thing happened with my kids and I need to dedicate myself to that for a while. This thing happened with my family and I'll get to my dream later. And it can just look like constantly putting off the inevitable, which is why you can get really stuck here. So that can be something that we sit down and really work through and figure out what's actually keeping you in that seeking stage and what needs to happen to move you forward into the emerging stage, which is stage 3. So if you see yourself in any of those stages, first of all, 0, 1, or 2, I just want to pause and say, this is normal. This is completely normal. Literally everyone goes through these stages, even though you might see some like person who you admire or follow or a mentor of yours seem to just make a pivot seamlessly, but you don't see what happens behind the scenes because algorithms don't love this middle, messy, nuanced stuff. They like the complete, perfect before and after stories. That's just literally what the internet likes and how it's wired. So, stage 3, emerging. All right, the emerging stage. This one also feels like a lot of motion, but actually might be one of the most frustrating stages that exists if you don't have a good handle on why it's actually quite normal to be in this stage. So hopefully I can offer something today that can, if you're here in stage 3, or if you're like moving towards stage 3, you can go, yeah, okay, that's normal. So stage 3, emerging stage, is you've still got, in some way, shape, or form, whether it's in your personal life, whether it's in your work, you got one foot in either the current or past version of you, or even not a whole foot, like a big toe is still like in the old version. It's not completely released. And then you got one foot in the new. So movement has started to happen towards the sort of finalized vision. And as you've started to move towards it, the finalized vision has become more clear. Interestingly, if you're in stage 2, where you know where you want to go, but you actually haven't really made a lot of movement, a lot of times people actually aren't that clear on what the finalized vision is. And that is because you actually have to move towards it in order to get clear. It's like you have to know it's possible and it exists in order to trust yourself to take a step forward. And then when you take that step forward, if you picture like the Candyland game, when you move a block on the road, you get a little closer, you can see the Candy Palace ahead, and you're like, oh, it exists. Oh, I can see it. And you start to get more desire and more hope and more vision. And then you take a step forward and then you can see it a little bit more clearly. So the 2 to 3 transition does require movement, but because it also requires an enormous amount of vulnerability and facing all the things I mentioned before, identity reckoning, relationship reckoning, deconstructing, reconstructing, all kinds of things, going from 2 to 3 is best done with a guide. 100% best done with someone walking with you so that you don't keep staying put because it feels too daunting to take even a baby step forward. Stage 3, you've been taking steps. You've been moving. There's some trial and error going on. Maybe you've had, let's just use coaching, building a coaching business as an example. Maybe you've had some practice. Maybe you've had a couple of clients who've done a couple sessions with you. Maybe you're starting to get some people buying in, but it's not your full-time thing yet. Maybe if it's a job thing, you've had some job interviews, you've sent in the resumes, you've changed your LinkedIn, you're getting some traction and you're not quite fully there yet. Maybe you even have a job offer. Maybe you've accepted it. Maybe you even started the job, but you haven't been oriented. You don't quite feel like you belong there yet. You haven't developed habits. You haven't really changed your lifestyle around it. And you're still full of doubt. You're full of imposter syndrome. You're full of probably distracting yourself with the wrong things. And what can be so frustrating in this stage is you can taste it. You can see it. It's like in your hand, the thing you want to move into. Yet you're not fully there yet. Not that we ever like fully arrive somewhere. I personally believe we always have a teeny bit of a connection into our past versions of ourselves. I call that identity integration. We don't actually like cut off an identity. It gets integrated into the next stage and it provides incredible resource, incredible experience, incredible wisdom. And if we cut it off, if you can't. The only way to really cut it off is to suppress it and pretend it's not there, that a past version of you isn't there anymore. It's always there. It's always somewhere inside of you, inside of your body, inside of your soul, inside of your mind. And in stage 3, it can still feel like that past version of you is operating more than the future version of you. It's hard to quantify these things, but this is what I mean by it's more of a felt sense. It's a somatic experience where you're like, I'm just not quite there yet. I'm not across the threshold. And what's also really interesting about stage 3, where you're not quite there yet, this is a place where you can also get stuck on the treadmill of doing things and feeling like you're moving towards that candy palace ahead of you. But those things are actually distracting. And here's why that's completely normal. That's also a way that your system is avoiding the vulnerable grieving that needs to happen to move from stage to stage. Grieving has to happen in order to go from stage to stage. You have to subtract in order to add, in order to move forward. That's human development. And we like to skip the subtracting because the grieving part sucks. It's not fun. There's 0 fun to it. 0%, 0 stars. 5 stars though, when you have the courage, when you have the support, when you have the wherewithal and the capacity to sit with yourself in grief. And part of the reason why people don't move from stage 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and of course 3 to 4 is this isn't a character flaw. It's not that you're just avoiding grief. You might have too much going on in your life, whatever it is, for your system to have the capacity to sit with grief. And that's something that I see so often especially with people grappling with something like becoming a mom. And you're already grieving who you were before you became a mom. You're grieving that life. Maybe there's postpartum depression or anxiety going on. So your capacity is very low. You're not sleeping. You're not eating well. You're literally giving of yourself to another human. Maybe you're trying to also work. Maybe you're also trying to keep a household. You guys know. I don't need to lay it all out for you. And so what also happens a lot in the postpartum period is moms go, oh my gosh, I can't go back to the old version of my work. I want to be more present for my babies, my kids. I want to take care of myself better, all those things. And yet to face the grieving of letting go of the past while you're holding all these other things going on, it can be a little much for your system. And this is why having support is so critical and why having someone walk you through these transitions can be so critical. It's also common in perimenopause. I work with a lot of women going through these sort of different sort of women's rites of passage. And in perimenopause, you're literally losing your hormonal buffer that helps you have capacity. And when you start to lose that and your emotions and your nervous system just gets triggered a lot more easily, your window of tolerance lowers. If we're using like a somatic term, it can feel like something small tips you off a lot more easily. Either you get more anxious or just more kind of flat and uninterested. All this is normal in perimenopause. When we add what's also a natural questioning of who you are, what you're supposed to be doing with your life, who your people are, sometimes known as the midlife crisis, sometimes known as just the midlife awakening, sometimes known as running out of fucks to give. When you add all of that and then decide to try and move into something new, that adds grief. And if you're also working a job, caring for aging parents, caring for kids, trying to keep your body in check, juggling all the things, you just might not have capacity to face the grief, which is why you might stay still in a certain stage. And that can feel really frustrating. But what I want to offer is it's also happening at the exact pace that your system can tolerate. And that's actually really kind to your system. And you're not like having a mindset issue and you're not just like living in imposter syndrome and not moving forward because of it. Although those things might be existing as well. And so again, people ask me all the time, well, what do I need to do, Julie? What do I need to do to move through this? How do I just process the grief? And I say, you don't need to do anything. Literally nothing else needs to be added to your list of doing. What needs to happen is you need to be held through it across these thresholds. When we cross thresholds in life, there's got to be subtraction. There's got to be letting go in order to let in the new. Got to do the spring cleaning, get rid of the stuff in order to make space for the newest version of you and all the goodness that comes with that. And in these life thresholds, when we cross them, it's supposed to be done being held in community by other people. But we've been trained to isolate ourselves. We've been trained to be the strong, independent woman and do it ourselves. And we shoot ourselves in the foot when we do that. And this is especially true in healthcare, where we are the ones who hold other people. And we have been taught that if you are the one being held, that you're weak, that you're lesser than, that there's something wrong with you. If you're feeling feelings, if you're feeling grief, oh my God, you must be failing. You must be doing something wrong. If you're not constantly feeling like the certain, competent, confident, strong one. I had a conversation with a client last week who is crossing a really huge threshold into a new career back for herself. And she has subtracted things in action, but she hasn't processed all the feelings that come with the subtraction, because she has also been going through a lot personally. And we were talking about what needs to happen to process through both the subtraction and all of the feelings that are coming up with crossing the threshold into the new world that she's moving into. And she was so funny. She said it like jokingly, but she was also like ragingly serious, which was, okay, Julie, just give me the like to-do list on how I process through all of this and I'll just go do it, me and my journal. And I was like, that's cute. You know, I've been working with her for like 5 to 6 years, so we can be very frank with each other. And I was like, that's really cute, but that's actually like an avoidance technique. That's a distraction technique for the thing you actually need. In order to develop compassion for yourself and all of these feelings and actually feel like you could have capacity for them, the easiest way to do that is actually to share the space with someone else, to be co-regulated through them rather than trying to regulate yourself through them. And that's the work I do to help you cross these thresholds and keep moving and make it more seamless. It's the same reason we have doulas, midwives, support people when we're birthing something, a human, or anything in our lives. When you're birthing a new version of yourself, consider me your doula. There not to do it for you, but to help you be in it in a way where you don't have to carry the stress of it yourself because it's stressful. And bringing it back to stage 3, emerging is birthing. Something's coming out of the birth canal, metaphorically speaking. And doing it alone is one of the most dangerous things that can happen. And therefore, it can keep you stuck there. It can keep you trying things or doing things that make you feel like you're making progress, but they're actually going to slow down the birthing process or keep it from being birthed altogether. So emerging is such a fun stage. It's such a beautiful stage to have someone walking through you. Typically, walking through the emerging stage is the ongoing coaching work I do with women. So typically, my first coaching offer, soul story mapping, happens. I mean, you can map at any stage whatsoever, but typically people are not quite clear on exactly where they're going next. So that's what soul story mapping is for. Stage 2 is usually what needs to happen there to figure out where I'm going, what are the steps I need to take, not just on an action level, but emotionally. How do I need to support myself? Who needs to be there for me at the birthing? All the things. Stage 3 is the actual birthing of it, which is a process. It's not just a one and done. I put up my shingle and I'm now in this job and I feel great about myself while I'm there. It's a whole identity integration. It's a stepping forward. It's a becoming. And that process can actually be really messy because if you don't have the support moving through that process, you can kind of stay stuck in that stage 3, which can be, again, so frustrating. So that's typically the ongoing longer term coaching work I do with people who are brave enough to be held and seen and supported. And most people know that that's what you need to do. You need to have someone walk you through. But again, your system might throw up all kinds of pieces of resistance, like, oh, I don't need help right now, or oh, I'll do that later, or oh, I can just handle it by myself with my journal, which backfires. It just keeps you in that stage 3. Even if you are already in the new thing, even if you take a new job and you go there, you might not feel like you fully land. And all the reasons you left all the old jobs and took the new one, they're going to recreate themselves because there's two sides of the street, right? You can have a job that looks really good on paper, but then there's the you that's in the job too. And I don't say that with blame, but we see the world through certain lenses, which is 100% based on our inner experience, the way we're wired, all kinds of things, our temperament. And someone in your new job could say something or do something that to another human is like super helpful, super productive, super encouraging. And to you, if you haven't walked through all of those things that need to be subtracted and processed and let go and started to really process through the becoming, the who you're becoming, it might land with you in a way that's extra triggering to your system. And then you get all worked up and then you start to question, oh shit, did I make a bad decision? And before you know it, you're back in the actual scouting stage, wondering if you need to be doing something differently. So it is possible to go from the emerging stage 3, back to scouting. And then you just repeat the cycle over and over again and never quite land somewhere. So that's the difference between someone who moves from stage 0, status quo, super happy, super thrilled with what they're doing, all the way to stage 4, you've landed, super happy, you're swimming, super thrilled. That's the ideal situation, right? And then there's the people who are constantly changing. It looks like constant reinvention, but it's actually just a constant circling between stages 1 and 3, and you never actually arrive anywhere that feels like your system can just exhale. Okay, so those are the stages. Hopefully you saw yourself in any of those. Stage 4 is that I have arrived. I'm sure, I feel certain this is the right track for me. It's not that you don't still feel doubt every now and then. It's not that feelings don't still come up there. Of course they do. You're a human. Of course that's going to happen. You're likely dealing with other humans if you're a healer or a helper or a service-oriented person. And so of course you're going to feel things. Of course, every now and then you're going to want to burn it down and build something different. This is all normal. And in the 4th stage, shining, also known as swimming, it's like the 2nd stage of swimming, then ultimately you might be like, I've outgrown this. And because you've actually gone through the developmental sequence of 0 to 4 before, the next time you pivot into something new, you know what it's going to feel like and what it's going to look like. And you also probably know you want someone to walk through it with you. And that's why I get repeat offenders and clients who are like, all right, well, I built the thing, I've outgrown it. It's time to build the new thing. And you start to become okay with the reinvention, and it becomes a part of who you are and something that doesn't become something you want to hide or shame. yourself for, and people actually start to not push back when you're starting to question or come up with new ideas. It can be very fun. All right, so let me share some stories about clients who've gone through the 0 to 4 process with me. And I say 0 to 4 because a lot of times these are healthcare colleagues, so I know them. And whether they were clients or not, I got to witness them happy in the status quo life of stage 0. And then eventually they started asking questions. And because we knew each other, because we're colleagues, because I've done this 1.5 billion times in my own healthcare and coaching career, they find their way to me and we work together to move through the stages systematically. So the first story I want to share is a pelvic PT who built a really, really successful pelvic PT private practice. Before that, she had worked for a hospital system and she went through the stages herself to build the private practice and loved what she did. And then as she grew, as she evolved, she started to want to do quite a bit more inner work with her clients. And as a pelvic PT, I don't mean internal work, I mean inner work, like soul, like somatic work. She saw that healing was so much more than her putting her hands on her patients and doing something to them. She knew that there was something really profoundly magical about that. And she wanted to continue to do some type of hands-on touch, but not necessarily in the way that physical therapy makes it very mechanistic and very like robotic and very sort of only about the body and not about the soul and the nervous system that goes behind it. She had first started thinking about that and just playing around with it. She took some trainings. So she was reckoning with it in the scouting stage when she would start to feel this resistance to do, like the clients who came in and they were just like, fix me. And she's like, no, it's so much deeper than me just fixing you. I don't do this for you. You do it. That's when she was in the scouting stage. And then seeking stage is where she started to take some trainings where she was like, oh, maybe I'll like take somatic experiencing or learn some nervous system regulation tools. And she started to play with those with her clients. So it felt like she was doing movement. This is sort of where I call transitioning in place, where she's trying on different versions of the new thing she wants to step into, but she's not actually stepping into the new thing. And like calling her work something different or billing differently or marketing differently. That was its own huge identity reckoning. Simultaneously, here in stage 2, where she lived for a year or so, her marriage was unraveling. And when I say that she didn't have the capacity to go through the huge identity shift that it would take to open up something completely new and reinvent herself professionally, I mean it. And so I was there as her support system. She also worked with a therapist, especially around the marriage stuff. They had a couples therapist they were working with too. So she had lots of people on her support team. And we were really in more of a dream and scheme and transition in place type of thing to set her up for success for the day when finally she would step into what she dreamed of more as coaching work, less physical therapy work, technically, and could help people with far more than their diagnose and treat conditions. So we took time and we worked together through the whole divorce process of also recognizing that professionally and career-wise, she wasn't going to be able to support herself. It was going to be too much, basically, to keep running her business. It was a very successful business, but she felt like with all that she needed to do in becoming a single mom and like figuring out how to buy a house and all these things, she got married when she was like 22. So she'd never really lived by herself. So many things were going on personally in terms of identity shift and purpose and who are my people. You know, she was reckoning with who are my friends even anymore because she shared so many friends with her. It was a whole process. And what we actually worked on instead of sort of the moving into the identity of the coaching work was, okay, what do we need to do? What you need to do? I'm not going to do anything. What do you need to do in the meantime to feel safe and grounded and secure as you move through this very messy middle spot of becoming a single mom for the first time at age 41 with young kids who also, you know, you're changing schools. There's so much that's changing, right? And so part of the work was deconstructing her identity as a business owner and giving herself permission to take a stepping stone job, a bridge job, which she ended up choosing a telehealth job. And she found a job with a telehealth company where she actually wasn't working as a clinician because she had actually just she had moved on from clinical work in this process. She was like, I don't want to be doing the diagnose and treat stuff anymore. I see people as so much more than that. And so she ended up finding a job as a client experience director, where her job was sort of the welcome committee for new clients. And then the person who was the cheerleader and in the background, making sure clients were having a good experience, making sure they knew how to find certain resources in the online platform, making sure they were getting good outcomes. But what was so cool about that is that stuff she did as a therapist anyway, but it let the therapist do the therapy and it let her really look for clients moving through the journey and making sure they got through the journey, and that the therapist also had everything they needed about that client and nobody was falling through the cracks. She got to use her coaching skills with this type of thing. It was such a great job for her as she rebuilt capacity in her system, in her heart, in her emotions, in her literal life, like establishing a home, establishing a routine as a single mom, finding new friendships, finding new hobbies and purpose that weren't rooted in her marriage, dealing with the grief of letting go of a marriage. Can you imagine all of that is happening here? No wonder she couldn't just pop into a coaching business, right? That was just a huge undertaking. And she ended up doing that bridge job for 3.5 years. We worked together on and off during that time because she did come to a point of stability. What I want to highlight is she's still very much in stage 2, seeking. She still has this idea of the long-term dream and desire. She's not there yet, and she is not taking steps to move into it. And this is a reason someone gets stuck in stage 2 for a good reason. It's not a bad thing. It's not pejorative when you get stuck in stages. I always tell clients, there's a reason you're stuck here. It's not necessarily wrong that you're here. There's a reason sort of all the forces of the universe are conspiring to keep you here. And rather than make it wrong, maybe we look at why this is working for you. And so that was a really good example of someone who actually intentionally got stuck in stage 2 and didn't try and rush towards the coaching work as a place to kind of be complete, because she probably would have succeeded, but it might have been at the expense of her own well-being or, her connection with her kids or something else. And so that was a really, really beautiful thing. What's interesting is we've started working together again, and she's now transitioned into stage 3. She now has the capacity and the resource to start seeking, even though it's not the seeking stage, to start emerging as a coach, to start opening up her business, which is now a side hustle for her telehealth job. And she actually has started to gain coaching clients. And in that process, she's built up just enough income with the coaching work to drop back to part-time with the client experience position. And she's taken this at a pace that her system can metabolize, which is something I help people identify what that pace is. Because as an ambitious woman, she could go too fast, she could rush it, and then end up regretting that later. And sometimes this is a painstakingly slow pace. Your ambition is like, why aren't we there yet? When you're in the emerging stage, again, it's like birthing. You just want that baby out. But at the same time, birthing too fast can also be very dangerous, right? And so she's taking it step by step. She started to feel somatically in her body. We do a lot of somatic work, how it feels, like the safety and the connection to herself to take it one bite at a time. And that has started to normalize for her to where when she gets this urge to go faster, she's able to see it for what it is, just a discomfort with being in the unfinished part of the process, instead of, oh my God, I have to go. I have to follow that urge and that desire right now. And then she brings herself back to staying grounded and steady where she is. So beautiful. So we're working together here in the emerging stage, and it's much more ongoing long-term work where we meet a couple times a month and we check in and just, take the next step along that game board so that she feels grounded in herself. And what she told me a couple weeks ago was, I just know this is going to work and it's going to stick. And what's cool for her about moving into the coaching work is coaching is a place where you can iterate so many times, change what you're doing, sort of change the container, change the offering, but you don't necessarily change the person behind it anymore. I've iterated like a bazillion times in my coaching work and actually went through a pivot for the last 3 years to arrive in stage 4 and feel like I'm swimming again. I never actually changed the approach to what I was doing. I just sort of changed what the container looked like and felt like and sounded like and all of that kind of stuff. So she's like got this confidence and this certainty, even though she hasn't quite fully arrived in stage 4, because she's moved slowly along that Candyland game board with support, where she's not trying to overdo it or do it all on her own. She can now see that candy palace ahead of her. She sees that it's hers, it's where she belongs, and she has the confidence to keep taking it one square at a time. So such a beautiful story. All right, so that is one client who has done a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful transition. And then I want to share some shorter versions of stories of people just to give you examples of what is possible. So I've got a client who we actually haven't been working together recently, but we worked together for quite a long time as she moved through this process. She built a viral Instagram following sharing pelvic health tips, and then she became a mother. She went from 2,000 to 65,000 followers in 6 months. I remember watching this happen, and I was like, oh my God, she is blowing up. And she had a new baby. And she documented her entire becoming a mom process. And it was so helpful for so many people out on the internet. And as she went through this, she was also reckoning with the identity of, well, I was a physical therapist. I did have a brick and mortar practice. I don't think I want to go back to that because I want to spend as much time with this new baby as possible. I want to be home. And so she dreamed of writing and selling a coaching program to this viral Instagram following. She had the numbers to support it so she could work from home and be with her baby. And so she was sort of in stage 1, right? When she's dreaming of these things, she's like building the Instagram, like that's kind of her current situation. It's sort of stage 1, 2. She's seeking, she's writing the course, she's picturing this dream life where she is cuddling with her baby all day and sales are just being made without her having to do anything. And she's like using her creative juices, which is a huge part of her personality, to produce content that is incredibly meaningful for new moms all over the world. And so she wrote a $99 course that she started selling, and people were drinking it up. She sold maybe a course every other day. So it wasn't like big money, but it was money, which is a lot more than a lot of Instagram influencers can say. But what she noticed, where here she's in about stage 3, where this is working and she sees herself there, but there was something in her that didn't feel like she could fully arrive there, because she started to notice that she was feeling weary. And at first she was like, I'm just a new mom. I'm tired. I'm breastfeeding. This is hard. And she kind of doubled down. She was like, oh, I'm so tired of like having to show up all the time. She was feeling scared of like losing her followers or becoming irrelevant. And she felt like she couldn't put her phone down. Like she was constantly like, she'd post something. She felt like she had to constantly check and see if people were commenting. And then she wanted to respond to the comments and all kinds of things. And so she noticed this vigilance started to happen, and she was like, oh God, I'm just anxious. Maybe I need to work on my postpartum anxiety, which she did. And she got help for that. But even getting help on that, she was just almost starting to resent the Instagram life. And when she started to feel that, let's say that she got back in stage 1, she actually resisted it. She was like, again, I just must be tired. And like, it's like her brain gave the feelings her body was sending her a story, a label as to why she was feeling that way. And it might have mislabeled it. And she doubled down. So she started live streaming her breastfeeding. She live streamed all of her postpartum checkups. She live streamed going to her own PT visits to try and like show that she was setting an example. She live streamed her workouts and talked about navigating prolapse with return to strength training and running. And this helped. It let her continue to get sales. And she was like, okay, this is just a hard season. I just need to double down. I was just weary because I'm a new mom. So she kind of circled from stage 3 back into stage 1, where her body is sending her some signals, and they are scary because she has built this following and she keeps getting this sense. It's hard for her to name, and she's scared to name it. And she's not telling anyone, maybe this is wrong for me. And so she keeps doubling down saying, no, it's right. You've done everything right. This is okay. Keep doing it. And she kept getting sales. And so she's like, well, it's working. I'm good at this. I guess I should just keep doing. But she would notice she'd get a $99 sale. She'd feel so excited. And then that dopamine hit would fail. It would fade. And she'd obsessively write new content. It would be like, oh my God, I didn't get a sale today. And she would find herself dropping everything, holding her baby while like trying to come up with an idea for a new funny reel or something. And it was taking over her life. It felt like an obsession. And again, that question would come in and say, maybe, I don't know, is there another way to do this? Like maybe this isn't right. And she gave herself permission to start listening to that. And it came when she realized she kind of moved from stage 1 to 2 when she reckoned with the grief. So one piece of grief that was, I'm lonely. I am surrounded by people who know everything about me, which gave her a sense of connection with people, especially with how much they were cheering her on and telling her how much the things she was saying were impacting and helping them. But she actually kind of looked at herself with her now 6 to 7 month old baby and was like, I don't remember the last time I went on a date with a friend or like had a mom drop by just to check on me. It's like she saw friends when she was out on a walk or, occasionally at like her baby was going to some kind of like infant newborn music class. She saw people, but they were like people she talked to there and then moved on, right? It didn't feel like ongoing building real authentic analog community to her. And this is what kind of moved her into stage 2, where she just started to play with something else because she also had a very challenging, vulnerable thought, which was, I am leveraging my child's life and my own vulnerability for what payoff? And here's what's so interesting. The marketing world will teach you to tell stories and to tell your story and to share your life and to be authentic and all these kind of things, which she was absolutely doing, and it was absolutely working. So it was working. She was good at it. Dare she say she liked it, but she realized what she liked was all of the constant input she was getting from other people. But she's getting all this reinforcement and validation and input, but she doesn't know these people at all. It's not an actual relationship, it's parasocial. And she also realized, she had read the book, The Anxious Generation, and she realized she's teaching her kids that every minute of her life and theirs needs to be documented online. She realized she's breastfeeding and holding a phone. She realizes how much she's telling her child, you need to be on your phone, and sharing their life without their consent. And that's a whole other rabbit hole we can talk about another day. I'm not here to judge or say, like, pass a conclusion on any of that. This is what she realized and what she didn't feel comfortable with. She realized it's not the legacy she wanted to leave. And it's not the lesson she wants to teach her young child, who there's so much research that just shows that kids can sense that you're not fully present with them, even if you're holding them in there. And that can actually be more jarring to their attachment and emotional regulation than not being present at all. And so in that seeking stage, she started to play with what else she could do. And it was incredibly hard for her to play with the idea of closing down her Instagram. And so what she started to do, again, she was like transitioning in place, which is what happens in the seeking stage, stage 2. She was like, maybe I'm just going to like post twice a week. I'm just going to cut back. I'm going to get a brick and kind of put my phone down and make sure I'm not on the phone. I'm going to create systems around it. And so she did. And she started to kind of set boundaries and make social media influencing work for her. But then she also felt like she had to explain to her audience what was happening. She's like, God, I'm like asking permission. She's like, it's like everything in my life is becoming a teachable lesson. And I don't know that that's how I want my life to be. I think I just want to live my life and not be like the expert at everyone else's life, And so as she's in the seeking stage playing with it, she's like, I don't know. What would happen if I just don't post for 2 weeks? So she played with it and she was like, oh my God. Yeah, people stopped engaging and my engagement numbers went down, and Instagram's like sending me all this stuff on my professional dashboard saying my numbers are down, and it was so hard. But she also noticed in her body how good it felt to be more present with her kids. And as she was in this stage, playing around with what could be possible, by chance, a colleague of hers told her that a physical therapist who had been renting space in a like multidisciplinary wellness space had just moved. And the colleague didn't even think she was interested and said, hey, if you know anyone, just let them know that we have a room open up for a physical therapist. And she just like blurted it out. She was like, oh, I might want to do that. And she couldn't believe she said it. She was like, whoa, hold on. I didn't even know that was inside of me. She played with it and she was kind of like, yeah, let's just explore this. And she went to tour the space, and something about it just felt really intriguing to her. I'm not going to say it felt good, but she was intrigued. And at this point is when she kind of circled back to me and was like, Julie, I got to talk to you about this. Like, I'm considering this. I'm not 100% it's right for me to move in that direction. I mean, look at what I've built. I'm debating, should I try and do both? Should I focus more on the brick and mortar only? Should I stick with the influencer thing? I value being home with my kid. It was a huge crossroads. And so this is the part in the seeking stage where it's possible to take the wrong path if you don't have someone mirroring back to you everything. and showing you that maybe it's not either or, it could be a both and, or maybe you actually do need to take a hard line and choose just one path. And just offering not permission, but just no strings attached support around whatever it is you decide, so that you can really sink into your own trust in making the right decision. And ultimately, in our soul story mapping session we did together, she didn't come up with the answer right then, but we gathered enough information on the themes and the directions that she was really sensing into her body on what was important to her now and where she wanted to go. She decided, okay, I think I'm going to play with this brick and mortar idea. There's a reason that just came across my consciousness, and I'm going to trust it. And so we continued to work together after that, because it was a big transition to subtract, to let go and grieve of all that she had built in the social media world, and make sure she didn't reproduce the same out of touch with herself habits, practices, beliefs, patterns in the new brick and mortar thing. She was like, all right, I'm going to make this huge pivot. I love you, Julie, but I don't want to end up back here again and we're having the same conversation about all these things that I now have a chance to look at and actually work through and process through, so I can actually step into not just this new brick and mortar business, or actually a rebirth of her brick and mortar business, but a rebirth of myself as a human, as a mother. This isn't just about my work. It's about who I am and how I'm actually showing up as a mother, what example I'm setting for my kids. So when I say it's identity level, when I say it's so much more than your work, that's what I'm talking about. And she knew that this was sort of a fork in the road place where it wasn't going to be perfect. It wasn't like today she's making these decisions that she's never going to repeat the same habits and patterns and beliefs and all those things. She's a human after all. But she knew that this was a line in the sand moment where she was saying, I need help. I need support. I don't want to try and walk this alone, because look at where walking it alone got me. And I want to show my kids that it's okay to co-regulate with someone else. I want them to know they can come to me. The only way for me to model that is to experience it myself, coming to someone else for support, and then know what it feels like to provide that for someone else. And so it was such a beautiful thing, a healthcare provider who so commonly pours of herself into other people, and knew that really the only way to practice what you preach is to receive it yourself. So we started working together on an ongoing long-term basis, and she didn't shut down the Instagram immediately. She just slowly weaned herself from it, like weaning a child from breastfeeding. And so this is where she moved into this 3 emerging stage. And she worked through the grief and the identity reconciliation, we'll call it, of no longer identifying as social media influencer. She practiced we went through a lot of things where she was grateful. We looked at the pieces of that experience that she wanted to move forward with and bring with her. And we looked at the pieces to let go of. And in that process, which was an extremely challenging process for her, we created a way of moving forward that was also digestible to her system. And I say digestible because it's so important to actually metabolize the decisions you're making, the wins, the losses, the grief, the good days, the bad days, so that your system can actually start to sense what's right, what's wrong, what feels good to you, what doesn't feel good. That's how you develop trust. And if you try and rush through it, you're going to miss it. And then you're going to end up repeating all the same stuff again and again. And so we took that step by step, bit by bit, so that her system could also titrate into the new version of herself. Because also telling yourself you're somewhere, okay, I'm now this type of person, this is who I am now, and then thinking that you're there just because you named it, like, oh, I have a certification, I'm now a coach. No, you actually have to go through the process of doing the thing and practicing the thing and falling down and getting back up. That's how you integrate your identity. When you just tell yourself you're something, it's like putting on a jacket and saying you are that, when underneath you actually aren't. And so we took this in a way that her system could titrate into, because when we change identities, when we change our work purpose, when we change our relationships, which she basically changed her relationship to 65,000 people she didn't know, right? That is a huge, huge challenge to the nervous system. And of course, she's also a new mom. She's contemplating having baby number 2. And so we also developed a way to do this slowly but surely. And believe me, I was the one always encouraging her to put on the brakes. Her ambition was always like, go, 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 right? So she was also deconstructing that go, 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 go ambition. And that allowed her to move forward into her brick and mortar practice at a pace that her system, that her body, that her lifestyle, that her baby, that her husband, that everyone could swallow without losing herself in the process. Sure enough, as things go for her, I've known her for years. Everything she touches turns to gold. Slowly but surely, she rebuilt her brick and mortar practice. She was actually making more than she did as a viral Instagram influencer. And she developed a schedule where she didn't have to work all the time. So she still got to be with her baby, and she got to be present in her next pregnancy the way she wanted to. And she of course felt that identity conflict of like wanting to be with her baby all the time, but also wanting to be at work. And we worked through that as well. It's such a beautiful story. These are just two stories of the deeper process. And then I also have clients who have done just pivots that you never would imagine are possible in healthcare. And I just want to share, I am going to share more of the before and after, the point A to point B, but I really think it's important to know what's possible for you so that maybe you can move from that stage 0 to stage 1 or stage 1 even into stage 2 and start exploring what it might look like to leave the well-worn path, especially if your body is tugging at you to consider that. So I had a client who for years worked as a home health PT and then moved up the management ladder, which paid her more, gave her more ability to work from home. She loved that. But what she hated about it was like the corporate hierarchy, the red tape, like her employees would come to her with ideas on how to change and make things better for patients or even for their own practice. And moving that up the corporate chain and back down would take way too long. And oftentimes they would be shot down because of funding issues or whatever. And that just became really frustrating for her. Her creative side, her ambitious side, her go-getter side felt like it was being shut down. And her sister-in-law asked her to design a website for her new consulting business. She had always dabbled with web design and like graphic design just for fun. And so on weekends and evenings, she learned to code, she learned to design, she learned about AI, and she designed the website. It was beautiful. It was a masterpiece. And then she started designing websites for friends as a side hustle. And when we sat down, she was kind of at that seeking stage that like, oh, should I move forward with this? She was filled with anxiety because she didn't want to let her employees down. She was like, I could move into this. I feel like I can't make enough money. She would talk about her job in management, and you could just like, her voice would raise an octave. It's like she was trying to justify to me that it was good work and it was a stable paycheck and it gave her healthcare benefits, all reasonable reasons to stay. But then she would talk about the website business and her voice would lower an octave and her face would light up and she was suddenly like in the room, present. And it just seemed like she was just telling the truth about herself. And what was so interesting was she wasn't clear on, she kept telling me, I don't think I can make enough as a web designer to not only like pay the bills, but cover health insurance, because she was the one providing health insurance for her family. And I asked her just like straight up, I was like, well, how much is enough? Like, what do you need to make? She had no idea. She and her husband had, like, her husband did all the bills. She had no idea what she actually needed to contribute to her family. And then she also, as most of us do, had no idea how much health insurance for her family actually would cost, which is a lot, but she didn't know what that looked like. And as it turned out, she was already covering most of that with her paycheck. She was halfway there with what she was making in her website design business. And all she really needed to do was a very modest price increase in her web design business, which she felt comfortable doing, and then get one extra client a month. She had to free herself up from the home health job in order to have the time to take on one extra client a month, and she just hadn't done that. And so what she did was she put aside money into savings for a couple of months to give herself sort of a cushion, and so that she could leave her job and give herself the space and time. And then and she also worked with me over the course of several months to build up the confidence, the identity shift. She did a bit of a shift in place. She started taking things off her plate at work, just so it didn't feel like it was such a 180 pivot when she put in her notice at work. So what she did was she resourced financially, she resourced logistically and emotionally before she actually took the leap. And this is a piece that people often don't do in moving from stage 2 to stage 3. And that's why they stay stuck in stage 2 and that spinning on the treadmill. They don't go through these more logistical things, but also emotional resourcing to actually start the birthing process all the way into the next thing in the emerging stage. And so as she did that, she became very busy. She was very full trying to get new website clients, to the point where she got to what I call the bulge, where she was taking on new clients. She was making almost enough money, not quite enough. She had enough in savings. She was all resourced. And I usually find this is the emerging stage. This is where you're bulging, like that baby's about to come out and it's time. it's time to birth the baby. And so she put in her notice. A few people were disappointed. Her parents questioned why she would leave a stable job and benefits. But she had worked up the emotional resource to handle all of the pushback. That's what we had worked on. And so within 12 months of first coming up with the idea, she took the leap. And within 12 more months, she had not only replaced her corporate income and made enough to buy health insurance, but she had doubled her income. Pretty cool. And now she's pretty much swimming in stage 4. She is good to go. Birthing in the emerging stage was an emotional process for her. And I was there walking with her through it. But ultimately, she then moved into stage 4 and, maybe eventually she'll make a pivot into something else. But right now she is swimming and she is good and she has arrived. So that's one that I thought is always just so interesting, kind of going from clinical work into corporate into web design. She didn't see that one coming, but it allows her to be creative and obviously have flexibility in her schedule and have full control over, honestly, her financial decisions, which going from someone who didn't even know anything about her family's finances to now having full control over her contribution to it is incredibly empowering for her. Another story of a client who went from building a thriving sports PT practice to realizing, even though she was very good at entrepreneurship, she didn't like the constant need to market and try and get clients. And so she closed it down. She worked as a traveling PT for a while. She had gone through a couple of breakups. And so similar to the divorce client, she closed her practice and had gone through a breakup and was like, I need to be free for a bit. And so she got contracts as a traveling PT. She traveled the country. She'd work in places for 3 to 6 months that are more rural, but near national parks or near beautiful places to hike and mountain bike and kayak and run and all the things she liked to do. And it was a time for her to just rediscover herself personally, and get back in touch with what she loved: travel, adventure, being in beautiful places. And yet she knew she wanted to have ultimate freedom. She didn't want to have to be in person with clients. She is the type of gal who she's like me, can't be bothered to have to show up somewhere regularly on a schedule. If you know, you know. And ultimately, she landed at a place that she absolutely loved to be, which is actually where she grew up. And she settled down. She found a really great partner and realized, now that she'd done a couple of different versions of PT, she'd also worked for a hospital a long time ago. She realized what she wanted. And this is such a great example of sometimes you have to kiss some frogs in your career and go through different stepping stones to actually figure out what's best for you. And so ultimately she pivoted into telehealth PT. She loves it, loves being able to help people work remotely, and she gets to set her schedule. So she does have to show up somewhere on a schedule, but as long as she sees a certain number of patients every week, she gets to decide when those sessions are, which she loves. So for her, pivoting through every stage helped her claim or reclaim a part of herself till she ultimately was able to integrate them all together. That's a super cool story. And then another one, love this one so much. This is one that you might not have seen coming, and she definitely never saw coming. This client finished top of her PT school, completed a neuro residency, built a multi-6-figure neuro practice. She was speaking on big stages at state conferences. She was teaching courses in PT school. She'd authored a book chapter. And then perimenopause came knocking. So this is moving her from the dream life as a clinician into stage 1, going, oh, shoot, this is maybe not what I want. And she realized she just didn't have the capacity for all of that anymore, or the bandwidth. And she was starting to just not want to be a part of that. It wasn't sudden. It slowly grew. And she did the same thing everyone else does, which is double down. She was like, maybe I'm just need to work harder. She taught more courses. She took more speaking events. She poured herself into her practice even more. That didn't work. Her body just spoke up louder. Then she just got this idea. She was out with a friend who was a real estate agent, and that person had done a massive career shift into real estate. And she was like, that's interesting. I love real estate. I'm interested in that kind of thing. I'm good at sales. She saw how many of her skills in clinical care, in people skills and all that kind of stuff were transferable, in being an entrepreneur and running a practice. And so on the weekends, she, here in the seeking stage now, stage 2, she studied, she got a real estate license. And over the next year, she started to move into it. She started to emerge. She shadowed seasoned agents, and then she started taking on clients. And she was emerging. She had one foot in the clinical world and running her practice, and then one foot in the real estate world, and it was working. Ultimately, she stepped out of clinical practice altogether. She kept an ownership stake in her practice. She hired a CEO to actually run the practice. So she had like some income coming in from her practice, some distributions, but she wasn't actually operating inside the practice, which is kind of the dream. She never really wanted to actually sell her practice or move away from it. And so financially, that was an important resource for her. And she always kind of wanted the option to go back. That was one thing she wasn't ready to let go of or like subtract the whole PT identity, which I thought was really wise for her. Some people need to subtract it and let it go, and some people don't. But eventually she became the top broker in her area and like just poured herself into real estate and loves it. And it was such a good transition for her, especially moving through perimenopause with all the body changes that happened. Ultimately, she had a sick parent that she needed to care for, and it gave her so much more leeway and flexibility to be present. All right, one more story. Oh, I love this one. Okay, I have a client who was a nurse practitioner who worked in a hospital system, loved like all kinds of different clients, but loved working with clients, particularly from marginalized communities with all sorts of different cultural backgrounds. And she saw how so many people had different spiritual and religious beliefs that conflicted with the sort of traditional Western white patriarchal practices in the US healthcare system. And just something woke up in her of like, this could be different. I could do something different. She found herself just naturally like starting to play with it. So this is sort of the seeking stage where she would talk to nurses or other clinical staff about like, she would just kind of flag the patient's spiritual and religious beliefs and just naturally start doing some research around those and discussing those with clinical staff on ways they could actually take those into account to provide even more patient-centered care. And that birthed a wild idea, which was to get her Master of Divinity degree and move into health chaplaincy, which she actually did at the same hospital, a major metropolitan level 1 trauma center. And she was able to actually like give to patients. So this is such an example of like nurse practitioner was sort of the doorway into what her soul really wanted her to do. It wasn't a wrong step, even though it was a lot of school and a lot of money, but it was the doorway to give her the experience and the wherewithal to find actually what was right for her. And yes, she had to go back to school, spend more money, all the things, but she found a way to make that financially feasible. And it moved her into a part of the health field, crossing over into the sort of spiritual and religious field, which is a huge part of her identity. And she was able to build programs and hospital protocols to help clinicians, sort of the way she was playing with the nursing staff, so that they could take cultural and religious beliefs into account when treating patients. And she ended up winning like local and national awards for her program. It was super cool. I love that story because, you know, people who do have spiritual practices or beliefs or religious beliefs or practices and go into healthcare sometimes can feel a real conflict because, you know, you might be taught it's not professional to talk about those things, but it can be a really important way to connect with patients. And she sort of became a non-denominational chaplain who would help people of all different backgrounds. So it wasn't like she was trying to impose her beliefs on people, but it gave her the skill, the credential, place, and the like the emotional and sort of professional safety to bring that part of her to the surface. And it's such a beautiful story of like a real pivot, but also still staying and doing more or less the same work. But now she's not diagnosing and treating disease. She's helping people walk through the softer side of the experience, which I think a lot of us, especially as women clinicians, we really thrive at that. And she was able to step into that lane fully without being bogged down by all the clinical diagnose, treat, documentation things that felt like she was moving away from patients that way. So those are just a couple of stories. I posted a blog about this. Please feel free to go to my website to read the blog. There are more stories. But the summary of this is pivots are never clean. They are messy. They take a lot longer than you think they're going to take. That is the bad news, but also the good news, because that time, if you actually allow it, is what allows you to move from stage 0 all the way into 4, instead of going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, constantly circling the plane, but never actually landing somewhere that feels right for you. And we talk about the before and after. We talk about the 0 and the 4, point A and point B. We see the announcement on LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever that makes it all look so clean and enviable, and we're so proud of our friends or whatever, or maybe we're jealous, you know? But we don't talk about that middle part. We don't talk about how long it takes or what it actually took to go through all of that. The hard conversations, the relationships that broke, the heartbreaks, the grief, the frustration, the excitement, the dreaming, the experiments we did. We don't talk about the spaces where you're scouting and seeking and emerging. And I think we need to. I think we need to normalize that, where you're not fully in the new thing yet and you're not extricated from the old one. Because life isn't a clean before and after, ever, for any part of our lives. We don't talk about where you're squeezing your next thing on weekends and wondering if you're doing it wrong, or you're hiding it from your employer because you don't want them to know. Or we don't talk about where your nervous system is legitimately throwing up alarm bells, either to get your attention and tell you to just consider that maybe this thing isn't right for you, or you're trying to move too fast into the next thing and your nervous system is throwing up flags saying, slow the F down. Please take this one bite at a time. We don't talk about the grief of the version of yourself, of your relationships, of your friendships that you thought you'd have forever. That is, to me, what I see in clients, the thing that holds people back the most. You're afraid of who you're going to lose when you move forward. And that is why people stay. Because as humans, biologically speaking, we are wired to preserve belonging with our tribe more than we are to preserve or move into our authentic expression. Authentic expression can be a threat to belonging. Just look at the political world and the families that get torn apart by that. We don't want to talk politics with our friends because we're afraid of what will happen to the friendship, even if what we believe is truly who we are, right? And so the grief, the fear of losing connection with people, if that has happened to you, I want you to know it's normal. I also know that there's relief with losing connection to people, especially if it's like a toxic work environment or you're just tired of certain people, but you still might grieve who you were in that place. It might be hard to forgive yourself. This is one I hear from a lot of people it's hard to have compassion for the version of you that got yourself into a situation that you later realized wasn't right for yourself. And if that's you, it could be that you're circling 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and not actually ever moving fully into stage 4. And that's something I can definitely help you with. But all of this middle is messy. It's unsexy. It doesn't make for good Instagram captions. Believe me, when I wrote this podcast as an Instagram post, it was very difficult to cram all of this into one post, which is what Instagram wants you to do because it's messy, it's long. But this is where the actual pivot happens. And so if you're in it right now, if you're feeling the pull towards something that might feel crazy or wild, but also more true and more you than it's ever been. If you can't quite see the shape of what's next, you can't see that candy palace, but you feel like a tightness or a rumbling or something coming up, a whisper that says, maybe it's not this anymore. I really invite you to listen to that. Even if you don't tell anyone, even if you're in that stage 1 and you're like, I don't know what that means. I also invite you, obviously, please care for yourself so that you feel like you can function in your daily life and get support around that. But I also invite you not to quiet that voice, especially if it comes again and again and again, because it's bringing wisdom. And you don't have to know what the finished product is. And that is something that we try and rush and do. It's okay to just know that there's something saying this isn't right. And that is all you have to know right now. It's clarity, even if it doesn't feel like it. And I hope somewhere in some of these stories, even if the circumstances of these women aren't exacting to yours, you felt or saw yourself, and it brought a sense that you're not alone. You're not doing it wrong. It's not going too slow. And those rumblings and questions you're asking aren't your fault. You're not doing it wrong. You're not messing up. You might actually be evolving and growing and moving towards something so much more beautiful and alive for you. It would be an honor to be able to walk through that with you. So if you need support around it, please reach out. You can go to my website. You can book a soul story mapping session, which is the first step, no matter what stage you're in, where we map it all out, figure out where you are, figure out what needs to happen next, what pace it needs to happen, how to move in a way that honors your system, your capacity, your life, so you don't lose yourself in it or repeat the same mistakes you've made before, and how to not see it as a mistake. I know I just said that, but everything we do is serving us in some way. And that's not just like some Pollyanna positive look. Sometimes things really suck and they're still serving us in some way. And if you're in the middle of the suck, you may not feel that or sense that, and nor should you. It's not your job to try and figure out the bigger lesson. It's your job to just move through it and be with yourself and or get support around that. But hopefully these stories have offered some hope, especially if you're like, God, why isn't this going fast enough? Or am I ever going to get there? To know that you can get there. And obviously there's a lot more to these stories than I shared, but you get the idea. So please feel free to reach out, pop over to my website, read the blog. If you're wanting support, this would be a great time to treat yourself to a soul story mapping session. It would be such an honor to map out where you are in the process and map out where you could possibly go next and at what pace. And from there, it would be an honor to walk through the emerging stage with you and ongoing coaching, which is always an option. Thank you for listening to this. May your pivots be as graceful and frictionless as possible, even though they are often messy. See you guys soon.